Representative Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen. Historically, I've always asked about long-term, where the LCB is at. Are they going to be able to make the transfers that we're projecting out? And that's always been something I've always asked about. And in the past, I always kind of complained about the fact that your revenue growth was not projected to be as high as your expense growth, and that eventually those two would intersect and you wouldn't be able to do it. So I'm pleased to see that you have a report that actually has revenue growth at least somewhat greater than growth of your expenditures. But just because it's on a piece of paper doesn't necessarily mean it is always true. So with that being said, in the past, Chairman Holden has told us of expected growth of 5%. That's what he told us last year. And that was without modernization or Act 39. He also said that if Act 39 came in, there may be even potential for an additional 5% of growth. So I guess my question is, with Act 39 being passed, why is growth going forward only projected at 4.7%? And also, I do have grave concerns about even this year's number when our collections, our liquor tax collections, are only 3.6% ahead of last year. So how can we justify the growth that we have on this on the budget sheet?
Good. I'd like to take that. Just a short story. Last year, I was sitting back in the audience when a similar question came up, and at that time we did not have projections, and I recalled saying to myself that that's unacceptable, that we should be able to provide long-term projections. So one of the things we did was we asked our staff to really start doing that, to put together projections that can be considered reasonable, projections that we can defend in a setting such as this. And at the same time, let's be conservative and at least to the point where we can feel comfortable with those projections. We did not feel comfortable with going much beyond where we are now as far as the percentage increase for a couple of reasons. One, we're talking long term, but secondly, with the advent of Act 39 and now we have sales, wine sales in convenience stores and grocery stores and so forth, we're not sure how that's going to impact our entire overall sales increase. So we asked them to back off on those projections. So that came directly from the board. Along those lines, we at the same time wanted them to try to be really realistic with expenses, because we acknowledge that our expenses are high in a number of areas, and Member Nager and I spent a lot of time looking at those, and we expect to continue to do that as we go forward.
And if you don't mind me interrupting, just for the sake of time, since you did mention expenses, the last 2 years that we have actual numbers for LCB expenses, I have the growth at 8.3% from 14-15 to 15-16 for LCB expenses. And our estimated 16-17 growth you have pegged at 6%, which the year's not complete yet, so we don't know. So first off, are we going to be at a 6% growth? And future years you have tabbed at 4% growth. Now, like I said, it's very nice to have long-term projections. I appreciate long-term projections. But how did we get from 8.3 on the last two actual numbers that we have, 6% this year, which we're 3/4 of the way through? How all of a sudden, what steps have been taken to get to 4%? Well, that's a big drop.
A lot of that driver is pension and OPEB and workers' comp, and that's just an unknown. We really don't know what our final expenses are going to be until August. Our operational expenses in that time frame that you talked about were 1.2%. So what we can manage from an expense standpoint, I think we do a pretty good job of managing. What we can't manage, we can't manage. Yeah. And so from that standpoint, that comes through, goes to our P&L, and we're one of two agencies that have a P&L, and we're almost like a little microcosm of the Commonwealth as a whole. And so you see our pension liabilities rise, you see our workers' comp liabilities rise, and our other post-employment benefit expenses rise.
Yeah,
And so
even if you
they're a
look at
major
your balance,
factor.
even if looking at your balance sheet, those numbers are increasing dramatically year to year as well.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, your long-term liabilities are even far greater, which gets to my last question, because I see my yellow light, so I am running out of time. I'm sure Commissioner Holden would have appreciated that the last couple of years. But the last question, which is, knowing all these factors, and even looking at your long-term liabilities, which are very much, like you said, very similar to the state. Can you make the deposits, the $185 million as you're projecting? And I thought it was going to be $200 million, but that's, do you all feel comfortable that will happen?
Yes, and that's the short answer. A little longer answer to that is we have projected out for 5 years, and the good news is that 185 has remained stagnant for the 5-year period, which is good for us. We're standing on next year, the next fiscal year. We feel comfortable with that, and perhaps the year after that, things can change. Many things can change over the next 3 or 4 years. As it stands right now, our staff tells us that we can. And again, some of this is coming from our reserves. And as we continue to pare down our reserves, we have to keep an eye on that.
I appreciate it. I hope that is the case.
Representative